Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious in space as we're going to talk about this space capsule right behind me on this beautiful green screen. That is Phase 7, Gordon Cooper's spaceship for 35 hours, launched 60 years ago today, May 15th, 1963. Think about that. 60 years ago, the last solo mission by an American astronaut, Gordon Cooper. We're going to talk about that today, as well as how James Webb, the NASA administrator, started the NASA Space Art Program today. Or, well, not actually today, but with the launch of Gordon Cooper. James Webb created the NASA art program for media other than photos and film. And we have going to feature Paul Calley, the father of our friend Chris Calley, who has embraced our museum with his beautiful art, a second generation space artist just like his dad. So we're going to look at some good space art. We're going to talk about the NASA Space Art Program and those 8 first astronauts involved with it there on today's Stay Curious program. So we're going to kick it off. Marty Winkle, my co-producer, we're trying to go through some issues we've had with our program and kicked off a little late today. Sorry about that, but we'll go on. Everybody says thumbs up all the way around. So we're going to kick off the, we didn't reset the pictures there. That is a picture, a Atlas launched by Paul Calley, inspired, thanks to James Webb letting him on the, there. And do not touch keys as we have the same problem happening again. So, okay, it's hard to delay here when we can't show you any pictures there, but let's talk about how James Webb created the NASA Art program in just 4 years after NASA was created. James Webb saw a painting of Alan Shepard by Bruce Stevenson, and he came up with an unusual idea to hire artists to illustrate and illuminate the agency's missions. And this was what Paul Calley, his impression of the launch of the Atlas II rocket, all right? And Atlas II, we have a gallery here at the American Space Museum that celebrates the launch of over 350 Atlas rockets that put satellites in space and revolutionized the communications world back in the 60s and 70s. And 4 of those Atlas rockets were used to launch humans in space. Of course, John Glenn's 3 orbits, followed by Scott Carpenter's 3 orbits. Then Wally Schirra did 6 orbits, and then a full day 22 orbits by Mercury astronaut Gordon Cooper. So we are having our issues again with the problem here. If we hit if I hit something, a key, it's going to crash. So our problem's not fixed, and it's thank you for bearing with us here as I'm stalling for the computer to catch up so we can show you some more pictures. But let's just talk about the NASA art program while we're looking at Power is the name of this. Now, Calley did a Power to Go based on the Saturn V rocket lifting off, which looks a little bit different, but still dominated with the oranges and so forth. Webb wanted to capture emotions and the importance of what NASA was doing. And James Dean, who is an artist and NASA employee, became head of the NASA art program that now includes 2,500 works by more than 350 artists. The artists that were brought to the Space Center for the first time in 1963 were many well-known. Robert McCall is one of the most well-known space artists of all time. That was his forte and what he specifically focused on. Paul Calley also did a lot of space art, but he also did a lot of Western art, particularly fur trappers. Just some amazing stuff Paul Calley did. Robert Shore was one of those artists. Lamar Dodd, we'll see a piece of his work. John McCoy, Peter Hurd, and Mitchell Jameson rounded out those 8 artists that were paid $800, Marty, I'm not sure if they were there for the week, but they were allowed to do some of the training and so forth. $800 for a week, or even was pretty good money back in 1963 for sure. More like $8,000 today. So that was a pretty good payday. So I'm sure they were out there for a week or so on there. And some of the art that Administrator James Webb talked about has become iconic in America's eyes. Think of the postage stamps. We're hopefully going to see a few of them. And Webb said this in a 1963 press release: "An artistic record of this nation's program of space exploration will have great value for future generations and may make a significant contribution to the history of American art, as it certainly has." So there's a book for the 50th anniversary of NASA in 2008 called 50 Years of Exploration, NASA Art. And that's a great book to have. A lot of wonderful things that people think about. Hopefully, we'll see a few pictures today to show just not the rockets involved, but the people involved is what the artist captured in watercolor, pen and ink, pencil, acrylic. All kinds of art forms were unleashed 60 years ago on the Space Center, back by the great James Webb. And of course, I remind you again, the Webb telescope, named after that wonderful administrator of NASA. So, all right, Marty,
Okay.
Marty thinks we're okay.
I'm gonna back up.
Okay, he's going to back up our pictures there. And
I'm going the wrong way.
no, you're going the right way.
No, I'm trying to back up.
Oh, yeah, back up. Okay, back us up there. As we've got a couple birthdays. There's Frank Culberson, and just right there's where we start, Marty. 2 birthdays today on May 15th, the Ides of May. Tony England is 81 years old. Frank Culberson Jr. 74. England was hoping for a moon mission when training as an Apollo backup, but finally had a shuttle mission in 1985. He is one of the longest waits for a flight. He just wasn't in the right queue there with his flat top and the Apollo outfit there. England was born in Indianapolis, Indiana, May 15th, 1942, and he flew as a mission specialist in 1985, STS-51F. Well, Frank Culberson, right here, Frank was born on this date in Charleston, South Carolina on May 15th, 1949. He's a retired U.S. Navy captain. He was the only American not on Earth when the September 11th attacks occurred on the World Trade Towers, and he took this picture from the International Space Station of the Manhattan Twin Towers billowing on that horrible day in 2001. 146 days in space, Culberson was the first commander of the International Space Station for 4 months in 2001. And then that was his last mission. STS-108 took him up there. He was on STS-38, 51, and 105. So there's Frank Culberson. He held many powerful positions in NASA's administration, as well as being an orbital ATK, which I think was bought out by Northrop Grumman. Orbital ATK was on their board. So happy 74th birthday to Frank Culberson. He's one I'd like to see out at the astronaut encounters, Marty, that we love going out to see. So hold our breath. Power to go. No, that's just power. All right, his power to go, Callie's power to go, is the Saturn V. This is the Atlas rocket lifting off in there. Just an amazing, amazing image. But Gordon Cooper was the astronaut on board there. And there's a picture of Gordon. I didn't pick the famous one where he's in the mist around his feet and the Mercury capsules behind him with the red escape tower. I'm sure you know that picture. But Gordo, as he was known, was 26 years old when he flew the last Mercury mission. He was Uh, chosen at age 22, the youngest of the Mercury 7 astronauts. He liked the race cars and boats, which kind of got him in trouble with NASA because he refused to kind of stop racing race cars and boats. And they thought that was kind of risky for an astronaut that they had so much invested in. Born in Shawnee, Oklahoma, the only child, as so many of those Mercury astronauts were. Um, and he was a colonel in the U.S. Colonel in the Air Force, United States Marine during World War II, and he died at age 77, October 4th, 2004. He had quite a retirement where he was known to advocate UFOs. There was even a TV show that proclaimed to use a map that he made from space, seeing treasure ships where they were in the ocean, in the Bahamas and around Bermuda and so forth. Think about a little skepticism about that program because some data shows he never even flew over the areas that they said that his 22 orbits, he could have never seen that stuff, as well as his Gemini 5 flight with Pete Conrad. And they flew to a new endurance record of 8 days in space to show that astronauts could survive the length of going to the moon and back. That was an important mission that Gordon Cooper was on. But being the last Mercury astronaut to fly, Deke Slayton was grounded, of course, by a heart murmur, and he later flew on the Apollo-Soyuz test project. But Cooper was, I said, the youngest of the Mercury astronauts. Here's the launch of his Atlas II rocket 60 years ago. And this is the last time that any American flew solo in space. Thought I saw it glitch, Marty, when your head went down. But all right, there's Cooper after a full day in space, looking pretty happy there. He got to do a lot of experiments in space. He was the first person to sleep in space, first American to sleep in space. Germain Titov, the second Russian in space, spent a full day in space after Gagarin's one orbit. But he ate the first food in space. He had a roast beef dinner. First food in space by an American, I need to keep saying there. And he took a lot of photographs. He slept in space. On orbit 17, while crossing Cape Canaveral, Cooper transmitted the first television images from space on a slow scan black and white camera. All right. He took the best Earth photos at the time on orbits 10 and 13. All right. When he landed, the spacecraft tipped over in the water momentarily, then righted itself. Okay. Here is again the beautiful image. There's the rocket launch. And then there's Cooper in there, and we got the image behind me here. So when he landed on the deck of he landed near the Kearsarge aircraft carrier. And look at this, Marty. On the aircraft carrier is written out Mercury 9 with a space capsule out there. And how did they write that Mercury 9 out? That is Navy sailors in their whites on this aircraft carrier to welcome back Gordon Cooper after 34 hours in space. Now, I say that is the commitment that Americans as a whole had. These sailors wanted a piece of going to the moon race with the Soviet Union, and there they displayed themselves as Mercury 9 to welcome. And he actually saw that as they brought a helicopter. He landed about 5 miles away. The spacecraft was hoisted up. Cooper requested that he be hoisted on the Navy's carrier. Permission was granted. 40 minutes later, explosive hatch blew open on the deck of the Kearsarge, and Cooper stepped out to a warm greeting that they had decked out there, Mercury 9. How cool is that? After Mercury 9, there was another debate about whether to fly one more Mercury flight, MA-10. That was going to be flown by Alan Shepard. They were proposing a 3-day, 48-orbit flight. But in the end, they decided that it was time to move on to the two-man Gemini. So Cooper was given a ticker tape parade in New York, witnessed by more than 4 million spectators. The parade concluded with a congratulatory luncheon at the Waldorf Astoria, attended by 2,000 people. Wow. And dignitaries such as Vice President Lyndon Johnson were there. And former President Herbert Hoover made speeches honoring Cooper. So one last, here as we look at what the drawing that Paul Calley made of Cooper as his time around the Cape, seeing him there. Cooper again. Then Paul Calley would make the postal first day covers. There's the first day issue of the launch of February 20th, 1962, with the stamp on it of John Glenn. And that's a sketch that Calley put himself on that first day cover there. And Calley did this with the Mercury program as well as the Apollo program with his own stamp that you're going to see in a minute that Paul Calley made on there. So we are very proud to have a Paul Calley print in our gallery, Gemini Gallery. That is at the bottom there, right beside Gus Grissom's flight suit that he flew on GT3, the maiden flight of the Gemini with John Young. But that is Gemini 7 astronauts going out in their special soft suits out to be launched. Paul Calley original piece of art that we have here. So, and we talked to Chris Calley today, his son. Chris, thank you for sending me some of the pictures involved. Chris said this about the launch of his dad in this spacecraft. Jim Dean, the NASA the NASA director of art program, recalled standing next to my father during the launch. And when the Atlas rocket started to rise and it had cleared the tower, Jim recalled my father saying, quote, "My God, there's a man in that thing," unquote. And a lot of people were feeling that sentiment as the noise, the fire and everything going off there was so unknown and not, it's just something we weren't used to. Today we're used to all these noisy rockets waking us up at 1 in the morning, Marty, like happened Sunday morning to me. I tried to get up for that Falcon 9 launch, but was a little bit lazy and went back to sleep. And next thing I know, the rocket noise is waking me up. So, but back then in 1963, these were so many unknowns and so rare to see a rocket fly. And of course, we would be shocked to think that, oh my gosh, there's a human being on top of that rocket that once had a intercontinental ballistic warhead on it there. So Paul Calley was privileged to be in the White Room, particularly Apollo 7. This is a sketch he quickly made off his sketch pad that Chris Calley shared with us of Cunningham sitting there getting suited up. And then he would take this with his notes and his memory and turn that sketch into this masterpiece. Look at that. From this to this. Very cool, isn't it? In there. And so here is father and son. There's Chris with his dad, who sported a beard in later years. He died about 12 years ago, Mr. Calley did, in his 80s, I believe. But there's father and son getting some tips there. And Chris Calley's always been an artist. Chris told me that in his dad's studio, after he was sweeping up whatever was to sweep up for his dad or taking the trash out, his dad would give him an assignment and said, "Don't get a job. I'm going to give you an assignment." And I remember you telling me, Chris, something like Dad would say, "Sketch that black and white cat over there playing with yarn, and that's your assignment." So, and then his dad would critique his work. And when you see Chris's work, you're going to know that maybe the son has exceeded the father's talents. So Paul Calley's talents are not just with the space program. When you see what he did with fur trappers and his Western art, is how a lot of people really know the great Paul Kelly there. Well, let's look at some of the other artists, Marty, that were selected for this mission. This is the artwork of Lamar Dodd, quite typical of Lamar's perspective. He seemed to be an unlikely choice for a commission to create paintings on the subject of space. He was a regionalist artist, that is, his art aimed to capture the mood of specific landscapes and their people, not historic events. However, the art of NASA program also had to do what press photographs alone could not, include a human perspective. In this case, Lamar Dodd was the perfect candidate. He had a knack for bringing a touch of humanity to unexpected subjects, like this technician crawling out of a Mercury capsule being built in St. Louis at McDonald's plant there. Another artist we'd like to feature with Mr. Kelly is this by, can you see the spacecraft coming down in that picture? Well, this is Mitchell Jameson, and Mitchell was known for his depictions of onlookers at major events rather than the events themselves. So this style allows the viewer to believe that they're there as part of the crowd, feeling the energy and excitement, and I feel that energy and excitement sitting there as you're looking at the sailors on the Kearsarge as the spacecraft comes down, and it's in there somewhere, Marty. It's somewhere right in there is the tiny little capsule coming down in this Mitchell Jameson photograph from 1963 of the landing of Gordon Cooper. And finally, another unique perspective. That's why art is art. This is Jamie Wyeth, the youngest participant of NASA's art program 60 years ago at 18 years old. He selected a highly dangerous high location as his perch to paint the launch of Gemini 4 in June 3rd, 1965. The flight marked the first spacewalk by Ed White, and it seems the adventurous teenage artist recreated the spacewalk feeling from his towering position. And the question is, how did he get access to that? All right. Artists and photographers are quite well known for getting their picture and then asking for forgiveness later, okay, when you are in a maybe a trespassing situation there, like maybe Jamie Wyeth was there. So there's a look at some of the artists that were allowed to go to the Space Center. Oh, one other great artist, of course, there, Robert McCall. Robert McCall did the two-stamp image of the spacewalk of Ed White there, and the another two-stamper was done by Paul Kelly, and that was the Apollo 15 rover was a two-stamper there. So, but Paul Kelly did come up with this iconic image, forever ingrained in America's eyes. The first man on the moon, one of the most famous postage stamps ever, 10 cents. 54 years ago, coming up on postage. Now it's close to 60 cents a stamp, 50 something, I believe.
60.
Is it 50 cents? 50 cents to
60.
Oh, 60. Okay, 60 to mail a letter today. Wow. So thank you, Marty. But one of my favorite Paul Kelly pictures of all time is this one. He calls it the great moment. And just look at that. Just the low perspective. You're on the moon watching Neil Armstrong's tentative footprint off of the lunar lander's pad there. His arm still holding onto the ladder as if to hold on to the last sense of something from Earth. And when you see this close up like I have, the expression on the face is just determination of Neil Armstrong. That is one of my very favorite Paul Kelly pictures. Well, like we said, the son has just as good a chops as the dad. Chris, there is your 30th anniversary, 1989, or 20th anniversary stamp, airmail stamp for $2.40. July 20th, 1969, where Chris, like his dad, would make a sketch of one of their renowned paintings or sketches, and then put it for sale. And you can buy things like this at CaliSpaceArt.com. So, as we look back on the space art, we find it very important to promote art, STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And the A in STEAM can be astronomy. It could be aerospace. It could be astronautics. It could be agriculture that has been changed by things in space. So that A in STEAM, though you see it STEM a lot of times, the A was put there by Mr. James Webb himself to promote art. So let's look at some of the current art that we love sharing on this 60th anniversary of the Mercury Gordon Cooper flight. There is Chris, surrounded by some of his beautiful works of art there. Some of those look like photographs, like this Apollo 11, the lunar module coming back from the moon. Nope, that's definitely a beautiful acrylic painting that Chris does. This is Chris's montage. He's done several montages in tribute to the Apollo era. There is one that of his recent ones there featuring Charlie Duke is the astronaut featured there. And of course, Chris has done these montages for the shuttle era there, that beautiful shuttle montage there. Like I said, Cali Space Art is where you can own these there. Marty's handing me the who's watching today. Doug Forrest is another fabulous artist that I'm sure is enjoying today's program. We're going to show you Doug's one of his pieces of art hopefully tomorrow that he's got Endeavor, the nose of Endeavor in pencil, and we have Marty's got astronauts signed all around it. Really looks cool, Doug. Dave Stangy's watching. Thank you, Dave. He's contributed financially to the American Space Museum, and we certainly appreciate that. Diraj Singala's watching. Zach Morello's watching. Paul Hickson. Catherine Ezel. Dickie Casina's watching. Litza Della Porta. Stephen Yatcham is a Lake County spaceport. Okay. And the Code Blue Collective, Marty's watching. All kinds of interesting people catching us today. We're glad that you're enjoying the space art as much as the Gordon Cooper stories. There's Jonathan Ward on the left and Chris Calley with his Artemis program. Just wanted to get you in there and say hi to you, Jonathan. And Jonathan has written several space books, and he wrote with Mike Leinbach, the launch director, Bringing Columbia Home, the definitive story about the recovery of our Columbia spacecraft and astronauts. And Chris, got to show you going out with something he's recently done, honoring the Apollo 17 50th anniversary with this Apollo 17 last footprint on the moon. As you can see, Chris is very diversified, like his father Paul, in all kinds of mediums there. And there is father and son, probably a few years before the gentleman passed away in there, and taking another look at power. Just the energy of that, Marty, is just an amazing. Then Power to Go, the Saturn V one, is 2 stories tall at the U.S. Space Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. So, Marty, we got through it. Thank you all for watching our Stay Curious program today. Thank you, Chris Calley, for sending me the special pictures and quotes and so forth about your father. We're so proud that you have found the American Space Museum. It's a way for us to continually honor your dad and the great works of all these astronauts who were on the Cape Canaveral Space Force for the first time 60 years ago, watching the launch of Gemini 9 Phase 7 to end the Mercury program, like I said, 6 decades ago. So, Marty, thank you very much for efforting our little problems here. Things did sort of go pretty good, I guess, except we did have a little delay that we'll be working out again. So, again, thanks to everybody here at the American Space Museum for supporting our program. Jessica Galloway, our Trekkie Techie in the background there. She worked on everything this weekend. We love her for her volunteering to the American Space Museum, her time and talents. We'll get it straightened out there. Not sure what's going on, but this is episode number 816 in our 3 years that we've done Stay Curious. Born out of the pandemic, we're so glad that you found us to stay curious. So I'm Mark Marquette, and until we do it again tomorrow, I can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.